All right. Are you thinking about one day selling your business, or you have no idea? Should I sell my business, or should I be running my business a certain way in case I do want to sell? Well, good news is I've got Joe Valley here from Quiet Light Brokerage, who's got a wealth of knowledge in this space. And Joe's going to be talking about just some things to consider when you're either wanting to sell your business, or if you just want to maybe plant a mustard seed that one day might grow into a big tree that you can sell, so to speak. So anyway, Joe, I'm super excited to have you on Maximizing E-commerce today.
It's great to be here. It's funny. The first thing I'm going to do is plug somebody else. Anytime somebody talks about selling their business, that at the end of the day, that is what we do. We help people grow their businesses and understand the value and exit. But what we do more than anything else is help. So I'm going to plug somebody named Scott Dietz from Northbound Group.
Okay.
I did a webinar a couple of months ago, and one of the things I saw from Scott is through his analysis, he helps people with high-level exit planning. We do it. He charges for it. He's really good, smarter than the average human. But he says in his presentation that at least 50% of all of the money you'll ever make from your online business comes the day you sell it. And I talked about this with some folks we know in common the other day, and I think it's actually higher in many cases, where I've worked with people that have exited their business after 24 months and they're getting $1.5, $2 million. And I can guarantee you they didn't make that much money along the way. So I think it's higher than 50% if it's a younger business, but you can't achieve that if you don't know what the value of your business is to begin with and what the process is. So it's as boring as it gets. If you think about it and painful, it's called exit planning. But if you really want to be a serious entrepreneur and exit and get a good value for you and your family someday, or just love your business and know that it's a growing asset, you should know what the value is. And that's called exit planning. I hate to say it, but it is.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that. And
not too much, because we will put people to sleep if it's too much.
Right. We'll try to keep this as interesting as possible, but I have every faith that we will here. And you're going to be speaking at Brand Accelerator Live, talking a little bit about how you do a lot of what we're going to be talking about here. And also, just so everyone knows, has a little context, this isn't something you just started doing. You actually, and we'll get into your backstory here in a minute, but you helped Mike Jackness, who was on episode 8 of the Maximizing E-commerce podcast. You helped him get his business sold for a 7-figure exit. So anyway, tell us a little bit in your words about your background in this whole space and how you got to where you are today.
Oh, as you can see from the gray on my chin there, those that are watching on YouTube, I'm a bit of an old guy. I've been self-employed since 1997. And I used to run a radio direct response marketing company, or media buying agency. We bought their radio time. I took that and launched my own product in 98. Did radio, did a TV infomercial, then did the next product, did radio, then did a TV infomercial, and took that last one 100% online in 2005. And I told this story to Scott Volker in a meeting a couple of days ago. I sold a colon cleansing product on radio and on TV. Really exciting.
Oh, wow.
When I took that online, we morphed it into a digestive wellness product and expanded it. I sat down with my developer for the website. And I'm like, what am I going to write about? What's the content? This is an awful subject to write about. And he said, no, Joe, you will never run out of content to write. Write good quality content over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and Google will reward you. We did. We morphed it into a digestive wellness center. Google did reward us. We took it through the best of the economy and the worst of the economy, because I sold it in November of 2010 through Quiet Light Brokerage. I learned an awful lot in the process. So much to the point where I really enjoyed it. I talked to Jason, who was my broker at the time, still with Quiet Light, Mark, who's now my business partner. He's the founder of Quiet Light. And I joined the company in April of 2012, right? Yes, 2012. So I've been at it for 7 years, sold approaching 70 million in total transactions.
Oh, wow.
That's a little over 100 or so. And it's kind of funny. I did some math the other day. I probably do 4 or 5 valuations a week, helping people understand the value of their business and then, grow and eventually maybe exit. If you do the math on that, it's probably about 2,500 valuations over a 7-year period, but I've only sold a little over 100 businesses. So what's that, 4 or 5%? Very small. So the values in conversations, I love helping people and helping them grow their business and sharing my direct experience, because I've done an awful lot. I've seen an awful lot. I've talked to an awful lot of people. I've bought my own online business. I've sold my own online business. I've built an online business, and I've made some amazing mistakes, Kevin. And we know we learn from those, right?
Oh, yes.
Let me jog your memory and anybody in the audience that might be listening. So I bought a business on March 1st, 2012, and I had 42 amazing days. And then all of my top keywords fell off of page 1 to page 2 and eventually off a cliff. And I lost $250,000 in about 12 months. What happened? Can you think of the algorithm update?
Was that whole panda penguin thing?
It was the penguin
happening?
update. Yeah.
Yes.
I gave you a hint though. I said algorithm update. So yes, I learned
Yes,
from,
it did help a little bit there.
and it's invaluable. You know, you learn from your own mistakes. And I try really hard to share that experience with people that I talk to, both buyers and sellers, and make sure that at the end of the day, it's a good transaction when somebody exits their business. So it's good for both parties. That's the key.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's go ahead and go kind of in backwards order of starting with what is the vision of, someone potentially selling their event to, their business. And then, how would they prepare for it, and what are the things they should consider, even if they're not even at a position to even think about that at this point. At least they perceive that they're not in that position to think about it. So, how does a business even get sold?
You want to? Why don't I give a live example? I just signed a letter of intent today for
Please do.
700,000 plus inventory, so about 750 altogether. And that particular business is owned by a woman that came over from Thailand when she was 15 years old, lived in a small village there, came to the States, didn't speak any English. And I started working with her, I want to say in the fall of 2017. And she came in, she sent, reached out to us, did evaluation for her, went through the numbers, went through the financials, and all the ins and outs of the businesses, the things with hair on it, the things that are great opportunities for her and other buyers. There were some things that she needed to fix before getting a really good value for the business. She was emotionally ready to sell at that time. She had, I think, probably an 18-month-old and was trying to get pregnant again. And doing that, anybody that has kids that are that young know how hard it is. And running a business on top of it, very difficult. Regardless, we listed the business for sale in February of 2018. So she had 2 brands inside of one seller account. And one of the brands had been around for about 3 years. The other had been around for about 18 months and was growing like crazy. But the hair on it, the problem with it was that she had to go around to different locations in San Francisco to buy the pieces and parts of the product, and then assemble the package and then send it off to a 3PL to be shipped or to Amazon to be shipped. So it's kind of very local intensive. And we talked about how to solve that in the package and whatnot. We launched the business, had 5 or 6 calls with buyers, and that problem came up every time, and it was very stressful for her. And so 3 weeks in, she's like, Joe, this is really hard. I don't think I can do this right now. I think I do need to fix these things we talked about. I want to pull the listing. I said, good, smart move. Let's pull the listing. I happened to run into her in Austin last year at an event, and she was pregnant. She was 6, 7 months pregnant. She came back to me 2 or 3 months ago. She had gone through all of the growth opportunities, put them in place. She fixed all the manufacturing. So, in February of 18, we listed the business, I think probably for $459,000, if memory serves. She fixed everything. The business grew, good, clean financials. She used QuickBooks. Cost of goods sold were in place. The business was now very transferable. First, the business was well-aged. That's the first pillar. Risk was diverse with 2 brands. It's still 100% Amazon, so it's one channel risk, but she had 2 brands that worked together. They were both in the organic marketplace. Very transferable now. So it's going to be very attractive to buyers because she put all the manufacturing in place. Somebody else does all that for her. She doesn't have to see or touch the product. It gets assembled and sent right to FBA. We launched it last Thursday. We're talking on a Friday. We launched it last Thursday. Since then, okay, so before it was very stressful. We pulled the listing because she couldn't handle it. Now she has 2 babies. We listed the business for $699 plus inventory. She had 4 offers, 3 full price SBA deals, and the other a cash deal. That cash buyer came up to almost full price. We signed a letter of intent today. The process was very successful the second time. The first time we did it, it was an emotional sale. She woke up and decided to sell. I'm tired. I'm emotional. I want to sell the business. It's too stressful for me. I have enough going on. And it actually got to be bigger than she ever planned it to be, which is great, right? It's an accidental success. Some people go and get their master's and study at Wharton Business School and then try to do this and they fail miserably. She just listened to podcasts like yours and figured it out. She didn't spend a nickel. She just listened to guys like you that teach online and help. And she figured it out and was very successful with it. So fast forward all the way to now, under letter of intent, we're going to go through due diligence. She's got all of the third-party verification of all the financials in a due diligence folder already, properly labeled. It's going to be very, very quick and seamless, I think, in terms of getting through due diligence. The tough part now is getting through that, signing an asset purchase agreement, and then it gets funded, money goes to escrow, assets change hands, and then there's a training and transition period, which is going to be fairly simple because the buyer has 7 or 8 Amazon accounts at this point.
Oh, wow. So you mentioned that's a crazy story. Now
it's a lot of information. I'm sorry.
No, that's
talking all day.
good.
I'm kind of wired.
One thing I will say is now having 2 kids, a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old, adding a second kid never makes anything simpler.
No.
And so it sounds like she was able to do all of that and make a business that became easier to sell and sell at a higher price while doing all of that. So
imagine
it sounds like it took off some of the stress. So it sounds like it was a win-win all around. So tell me, how do you come up to these numbers? So you talked about it was like 450 and it was like 690 or whatever. So how do you even come to those numbers?
Okay, so how do we determine the value of a business? Mm-hmm. That got asked to me the other day, and I said, actually, we don't. It's the buyers who determine the value of the business. We have the data and the statistics to show what they're willing to pay. And sometimes we push that value a little higher and they tell us, yeah, absolutely, we're going to go with that. Or they tell us, yeah, no, that business is not worth, a 4-time multiple. We're interested in it, but at a 3.2. If enough buyers tell us one thing, clearly it's the marketplace telling us the value of the business. Not all that different from real estate. But here's the complicated answer to that. And that is, and this is the part where, everybody should have a sip of their coffee and pay really close attention to, because this is what too many people don't do, and they don't understand the valuation process and the real value of that asset that they have, which is probably their most valuable asset. And that is, you have to figure out what your trailing 12 months seller's discretionary earnings are.
Okay.
We apply a multiple to that number. What is seller's discretionary earnings? It is your net income when you run a profit and loss in QuickBooks plus add backs. Net income plus add backs equals seller's discretionary earnings. What's an add back? Okay.
You know the questions I'm going to ask.
I just did a webinar. We're going to put it up on our site at some point and have it in the can for everybody to watch, called What's a Legitimate Add Back, and a brief valuation overview. But if somebody runs a business and that net income is $100,000, but they also pay themselves $100,000, you get a $100,000 add back, unless they're working 60 hours a week. So you can owner salary is an add back, mobile phones is an add back. If you write off your home office rent, that's an add back. If you join Scott Volker's Inner Circle, that's a discretionary expense and it's an add back. A one-time website redesign that you do every 5 years, believe it or not, that could be a partial add back. And all of these things make a tremendous difference in the value of business. We listed something last fall for about $2 million. And as part of the add back schedule, we had a lot of detail on cashback credit card points. This individual traveled the world while he ran this business part-time, and he was able to buy all of his inventory with his credit card.
Oh, wow.
In the trailing 12 months, he had a $24,000 in credit card cash back that he slid over to his personal account. That's called an owner benefit, right? You as the owner of the business benefit from that because he had the documentation for it. It's an owner benefit, and the new owner of the business gets the same credit card. It's going to have that same owner benefit, so that is an add back as well. That added almost $100,000 to the value of the business. With Mike Jackness's business, listen to it. If you guys can find, it's Ecom Crew. I think it's episode 247. I shared it with somebody.
I'll make sure we link to it in the description.
It's just incredible what Mike does on that podcast. You and I have so much to learn from him as podcasters, right?
Oh yeah.
In his situation, he renegotiated the cost of goods sold on a primary SKU, ordered it, it landed, it was in FBA, and it was already selling. So it's $1.60 saving per SKU. If you go backwards in time, that cost is not going to carry. The new reduced cost is going to carry forward and saves the new owner $1.60 times however many SKUs sell in the next 12 months. So we made a black and white mathematical adjustment to the add back schedule and created an add back of that $1.60 times, let's say it was 1,000 SKUs. So maybe a $16,000 add back in Mike's schedule. And at the multiple that he got, it added an awful lot of money. More than most people make in a year, it added to the value of his business. That level of detail, I think, is what's most important and most often missed in trying to determine the value of your business.
So a lot of it comes down to this multiple, it sounds like. So that's the part, I think, where people probably have a lot of questions. And I hear it could be 2, it could be 3. And Mike's multiple was higher than 3, right?
Yeah, it was. But Mark and I, we're challenged with this all the time. It's the multiple. At the end of the day, what's my multiple? At the end of the day, it's really about what you sold your business for and what money wound up in your pocket after your expenses and your taxes. So yes, it's a multiple of that trailing 12 months seller's discretionary earnings. If a 100% Amazon business is doing anywhere between 100,000 and 500,000 in discretionary earnings, you're probably going to be in the 2.5 to 3 time multiple range. 2.5 to 3.5 times of that discretionary earnings. So if it's 500,000 in discretionary earnings and it's a 3.5 multiple, 1.75 million plus the landed cost of goods sellable inventory on hand at the time of closing. The multiples on Amazon businesses are climbing this year to date. It's again mid-June. I've had more in the 3 to 3.5 range that are less than $500,000 in discretionary than I've ever had before. I had one that I launched at 3.4. I think I launched it at. We had 10 offers on it. It got bid up to 3.6. The seller of the business chose a 3.5 multiple because it was an all-cash buyer and ended up with like $1.5 million after 2 years of running the business. So multiples, I know everybody wants to know the multiples, 2.5 to 3.5. I love that question, but I hate it at the same time because the most important thing is that seller's discretionary earning, getting that right, and then applying the multiple to it. What will sway that multiple is your year-over-year growth, your workload, the transferability of the business. How protected is it? What kind of a moat do you have around your business? Do you have thousands of reviews? Do you have a utility patent? Do you have a design patent? Are you brand registered? Are you selling on Shopify as well as Amazon? Are you selling in multiple countries in Amazon? Are you over in the UK, Germany, France, Switzerland, Canada, Mexico, all the places that you talk about and have so much expertise in? Those things matter a great deal and will bring the value of a business up or the value of a business down. I had a call with somebody today, and one of the things, the little golden nugget that came out of it at the end of the call was that 27% of his customers reorder the product every year. That's repeat revenue, and we're talking about 10,000 people that spend $21 every year just to buy that product, and that is growing every year because he has more customers every year. Those types of things, that the data points, the metrics, having access to that is so incredible. So this is why I love the multiple aspect of it. What kind of multiple do you get? But you got to pay attention to everything else that the emotional entrepreneur doesn't want to pay attention to. But the smart guys that are mature and women that are mature, by guys, it's unisex to me. If you're mature and running a real business you're going to focus on those things, and you're going to get much more value for the business, because it's a great business that the buyer is going to take over and grow as well. And that's the key, is that both buyer and seller have to be successful.
Good
I'm
stuff.
talking way too much though, man.
No, this is great.
Busy day, and I'm jazzed
You're
up.
definitely very passionate about what you do, and it definitely shows there. So when you talk about like the workload, I kind of know what the answer is, but for those who don't know, is that they're looking for, someone who's the Gary Vaynerchuk who's working 90 to 100 hours a week, or are they looking more for someone to be a Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week type situation?
If it's a 4-hour work week, they're probably not going to believe it. Right. Even the guy I talked to this morning, he spends, 30 to an hour a day on a business that, so that's 5 hours, not quite 4. And I always round up. Somebody tells me 5, I'll put 10 in the package, because somebody new coming on board is going to work more hours, because it's not as streamlined. Workload wise, look, it's got to be less than 40, no question about it. If you have 2 owners in the business working 40 hours each, you can only do an add back for one of them, because one of them has to be replaced. If I buy your business and
Gotcha.
and, your partner are working 40 hours each, it's not 100% add back. It's a 50% add back. Yours, but not his, because I've got to replace you and pay somebody that salary. If he's grossly overpaid, then we can do an adjustment on that salary. If I could hire somebody at half the cost, that makes sense. But workload wise, typically, I'm looking at something in the 20 to 30 hour range is more than reasonable. Many people will buy these to be owner operators. Many other people will buy them and put a CEO in place to operate them. And so it just needs to be a reasonable workload for them. People that are moving from the corporate world are used to working 60 hours a week, and they get really confused when they buy a business and it's only 20 hours a week. Usually they break something because they think they need to work more hours.
Right.
They just need to work smarter and not harder, like most people do as entrepreneurs in the audience. But at 20 to 30 hours a week is the typical that I see in terms of the workload for these types of businesses.
Okay. So basically they're looking for you to work less. So if you're even considering selling your business down the road, you probably want to make it so it's more streamlined. Now, that could be virtual assistants or technology processes or outsourcing of some sort. Now, if you have an employee or a virtual assistant, do they usually follow the new owner, or the new owner?
Yeah, they usually follow the new owner. The exceptions, like in Mike's case, Mike Jackness, he had, I think, 10 virtual assistants in the Philippines. He did transfer over 4 of them. He had to, because they have a certain level of expertise on the business, and they're part of what generates the value, right? If you have an in-house employee that is working on both of your brands and you're selling one of them, as long as there's a transition period where that employee trains a new employee, that's okay. You can keep that employee. We just can't leave the buyer high and dry, taking over the role of the employee and the role of the owner on day one. There needs to be a transition period where there's going to be some assistance there. In most cases, though, VAs transfer. If there's an in-house employee, it's a case-by-case situation. As long as there's a reasonable transfer time where somebody can train up a new employee, then that works very well.
So what does that transfer period look like? What is the expectation on the seller?
The standard asset purchase agreement and what's put in a letter of intent is up to 40 hours over the first 90 days after closing. So 40 hours over 3 months. One of the offers that came in on that particular listing for Lee, the young lady I just mentioned, somebody put in up to 40 hours over the first 90 days and then an additional 10 hours over the following 90 days. Because when there's seasonality to a business, we know that come, Q4, there's going to be questions that came up that didn't come up in Q1 if the 40 hours were taken up in Q1. Most buyers are looking for some safety and security that there's going to be, training time there in a contract. The reality is that the buyer and seller tend to generate a pretty solid relationship during the due diligence period and the training and transition period that, 6 months later, a year later, if the buyer reaches out to the seller's still going to be there to answer questions if needed. And it is training and transition. The seller of the business is not operating it for the buyer of it. They're just helping them understand how to do what they do and teaching them. Training and transition. That's what it's called.
And that makes sense. In listening to the episode with Mike Jackness's podcast where you guys were talking, I kind of got the sense that like there was a little bit of there had to almost be a personality um, cohesion, so to speak, between the buyer and the seller. That this 40 hours or whatever, like I was thinking like that would be brutal if like the two didn't get along, because like in real estate, having been on both sides of the equation, buying and selling, homes, you never even meet the buyer or the seller in most
That's
cases.
right. That's right.
Whereas here, like you're going to be talking to them for a while even afterwards. So it sounds like it's definitely something you got to make sure to like them.
This is kind of the secret for buyers. It's be likable. Be likable because everyone in the industry on the broker side knows each other and they will chat. Everyone inside of Quiet Light knows each other, and we have a back-end communication system where if I get an offer, on Lee's business. The person I didn't know personally, it turns out I touch base, I look in the system. He bought another business from Jason here. And I'm like, okay, Jason, we've got an offer from so-and-so. What do you think of this guy? He was very nice, very likable. I just wanted to verify it and make sure. I've sold businesses. The story, if people listen, they've probably heard this before, but I had a business listed for $2.3 million. And I had two full price offers on it. One was full price, all cash. The other was full price SBA. And the SBA one required a 10% seller note with a 2-year standby and a whole bunch of details that don't matter. But it was $230,000 on a seller note. The seller of the business chose the 10% seller note guy because he liked him more. He was going to take care of his employees. The employees were going to transfer. He cared about them. He cared about the business, and he liked him. And he thought, this guy's going to be great to work with in due diligence. He's going to be great to work with afterwards. That other guy, boy, oh boy, he was hard on the conference call. Yeah, sure, he's got lots of money and he made an all-cash offer, but what a jerk. I don't want to work with him. It's amazing what being likable can get you when you're buying a business. You don't have to be the highest bidder. You just have to be somewhat close and the most likable, believe it or not.
Interesting. But that definitely makes sense the way you've explained the process, because there is that emotional attachment to the business and the employees. So if you're giving it up, so what is that emotional attachment? Because I know how emotional it can be just selling a house, and it's just brick and mortar. I didn't actually build the house, so something I would have built like my business, I'd be a lot more attached to it. So what goes on in entrepreneurs' heads, and what kind of conversations do you have when they're selling their business?
Well, the emotional attachment of your business and it being a baby, the reality is that you get a new baby and it's called $1 million in your bank account or something like that. Right. You forget about the old one very quickly when you log into your account and you see what's there. The hard part is actually they've been logging into your sell account multiple times a day for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and then all of a sudden you can't log in. That's the funny thing for sellers. But I said this to somebody this morning, the most critical part of what I do, believe it or not, is managing people's emotions and expectations, because It is so emotional as a seller. And it's not necessarily emotional that you're selling a business that you love, because if you loved it and you want to hold it forever, you wouldn't be selling it. What's hard and emotional is that you're under letter of intent, and in 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, someone's going to put $500,000, $1 million, $8 million in your bank account. And that's when it gets very, very real. You're making decisions for people that you care about based upon that happening and that closing. And it gets very emotional, because more often than not during due diligence, you're on the railroad track from LOI to due diligence. That train is going to tip and swerve and almost go off the rails at one point or another. And that's when it gets emotional. And my job is to make sure it comes back on the rails and steadies and get through to closing. And it only works if we do collectively, we, myself, the seller, the buyer, a good job with trying to put emotions in check and using math and logic. Math and logic starts, believe it or not, the best way to close, two things. The best way to get your deal to close once you're under letter of intent is you go all the way back to the beginning and do a great job putting the package together. You do a great job with your financials from day one all the way through, or go back and fix it if you have to. That's number one. Number two is when you're under letter of intent, keep your foot on the gas. Make sure that the revenues of the business are still doing really well. For the first time in, I can't remember how long, at least a couple of years, I had a deal fall apart. It was last month. I had a deal under contract for $1.8 million. And the month of May, revenues came in. We were just about to get the commitment letter. It was an SBA deal. And the May numbers came in and they fell off a cliff. Some things happened, partnership between the owners of the business, and they just took their eye off the ball a little bit. And it took revenues off a cliff and it fell. And that scared the buyer to the point where he said, I can't do this. I'm not putting my life savings at risk now for this business. He didn't even want to renegotiate. He said, I'm out. So
oh, wow.
Do things right from the beginning, or fix them if you haven't. Understand the value of your business, get the details right in the package, work on a full disclosure basis, full disclosure mentality, and then keep running the business as if you're going to keep it for the next year or 2 or 3 or 4, and hand something that's great over to the buyer of the business, and you will close. You will succeed, and you'll be happy, and they'll be happy, and there'll be no issues afterwards.
Oh, wow. So what would be the things that one would have to do to prepare for selling? So if they're like, kind of like, this sounds interesting now, so I have a business or whatever, and I'm thinking about selling it, what would be the things you would tell someone? You need to make sure you do these things before we can list it.
Okay. So first and foremost, stop having casual conversations with people about it and get a real valuation. Okay. I don't care if you do it with Quiet Light Brokerage. You'll get the best one from us. I'm going to tell you that now. But look, you might want to get it from the 4 leaders in the industry. Get a valuation from each of them. Go through each of their processes. Take your time to do it and understand and listen and learn. There's more value in that dollar-wise than launching 2 new SKUs. There really is. Again, I've done this 2,500 times. I've looked at these businesses, and I know that there's so much more value in that than launching a new SKU. Really, seriously, and I mean that. It's going to take time, and you're not going to believe it, but you're going to learn an awful lot. Second, go to each of those 4 top, websites and click on a listing, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and look at it. Look at how the packages are put together and say to yourself, okay, how is my business going to look when I stack it up against these types of businesses? Learn, right? In real estate, you don't just buy a house and say, yeah, the pictures look okay. You go and you look at it. Right? I talk to people, they say, yeah, I've been looking around, I've been looking at listings. And I say, okay, well, what have you looked at? Well, I've been looking online here and here and here. I said, okay, did you look at the full packages? No, I'm just looking at the teaser and the multiple. So I got a pretty good idea what my business is worth. You don't. Why is it a business that's, 100% Amazon doing 200,000 in discretionary earnings? One's listed at 450,000, a 2.5 multiple, when the other's listed at a 3.5 multiple. Why? There's details within that package and that listing that are the reasons behind the valuation of it. So I would suggest those 2 things. Get your business valued, fill out the free valuation form on our site and the other 3 top competitors. Go through the process with a broker from each firm, and then look at the listings in detail from each firm. It's an incredible education process, and I think that's one of the first things that I would recommend somebody do. And then, of course, take the advice that's given to you and try to improve the value of your business. And it's not always top-line revenue. In some cases, it's letting go an overpaid relative and hiring a VA. Sometimes it's stop putting in 60 hours and doing menial work for 30 of those and hire a VA. Take the time to make that transition and do it and make your business more sellable.
And that makes sense. So that all helps from the sellability factor. What are those more hard things they need to do, like with bookkeeping and stuff like that? Like, what is it that they're looking for, that they need to have, whether someone is at they're day 30 in their business and they're just...
Right. If they're day 30, it's easy. If it's day 300, it's a little harder. It's going to cost you some more time and effort. One of the questions I always ask after doing this for 7 years is an assumptive thing. I say, okay, are you using QuickBooks or Xero for your accounting software? And I ask that because I want them to be using one of them.
Mm,
Excel is not accounting software. If you're running a real business and you want to sell it for a real value, whether that's 100,000 or 200,000 or 2 million, it's real to you. It's real to the buyer. You need to have real financials. QuickBooks costs $29 a month if you use QuickBooks Online.
right.
If you don't want to do it and you want to focus on other things that are probably more important, I don't do my own QuickBooks. I hire a company called CAP Forge, CAPFORGE. We refer people out to them all the time. There's 4 or 5 bookkeepers that we have that are available. We just refer people out to them. We refer people to them because they're good and we like them. Some are experts at Xero. Some are experts at QuickBooks. We get no referral fee. We just want people to get their books in shape. That's the most important thing, whether you're 30 days in or 300 days in, good, clean financials so that we can look at them and firm up that seller's discretionary earnings. Without good financials, I can't do that. So that's really the first thing that people should be doing. The other, look,
Oh, go ahead.
let's go back to Mike Jackness real quick.
Okay.
Mike had 4 brands in one seller account, all under one LLC. And we were only selling one of them. 2 of the brands were new, were not profitable. The third brand was not sellable because 2 of the SKUs were products that he was reselling for another vendor. That vendor said, no, we love Mike Jackness. We're not letting anyone else sell these. So it's not sellable. So 3 out of his 4 brands really had no value. They didn't hit the 4th pillar, which is the transferability of the business. So use QuickBooks, use accounting software, run a real business, meaning one brand in one seller account, unless you have multiple brands in there that you're going to sell all together, and then one LLC for each entity. If you've got 2 brands and you want to run them separately, separate LLCs, because if you commingle like Mike did, we could not get an SBA buyer. So we cast a broader net with SBA buyers. Again, back to Lee and her business. We had 4 offers. 3 out of the 4 were SBA at full price. The 4th was cash, but at a lower value. If Mike's business was, it's Color It. He talks about it on the podcast. It's
Right.
Color It.
He's very open about it.
Very open about it. If Color It had been in its own LLC and I had 2 years of tax returns, it would have been SBA eligible. And instead of I'm going to give a value range in terms of the multiple, somewhere between 3 and 3.5 is what Mike got. It would have easily been at 3.5 or more, given the 80% year-over-year growth and the recurring revenue and the growth opportunities that he had. An SBA buyer will pay more because they're only putting down 10, 15, 20, 25%. And it's a 10-year note on the rest of it. Cash buyers expect a discount. So one LLC for one brand, if that's the way you intend to sell off the brands.
Well, that makes sense because everything should be separate. It's kind of like with your personal and business, we're all told, make sure you keep everything separate. So if you have separate businesses, it would make sense to keep everything separate.
Yeah. And that person who I sold the business for 2.3, I've sold 3 businesses for him now. And he's always planning an exit well in advance by beginning at the beginning, which is separate LLCs, separate QuickBooks, separate accounting, whatever it is. And so that when he's always planning his exit, but someday he wakes up and he makes the decision to exit. And it's easy for him because it's all separate. He doesn't have to do another 12 months of work to fix things and get things straight. And unlike Mike, he's going to get a higher value. Mike knew what to do. I don't want to take anything away from Mike and his experience and knowledge. He knew exactly what to do. And he said, I'll get to it someday. And he woke up and that someday was there and it was too late. And so we had to peel 3 off, sell 1. And now in another 12 to 18 months, he'll be able to sell off the other 3. But it's not exactly what he wanted. He wanted to get rid of all 4 and focus on other things in his life. But because of the way he set it up and was going to get to it someday, he didn't. He's going to wait another 12 to 18 months.
And that all, I can understand it. So that basically, if you don't set it up right, you could be doing a lot of work on the back end. So it sounds like there's a lot people could be doing, even if they're even is the smallest inkling that, even if it's 1 in a million chance they might sell it, they might as well at least run the business like they might sell it. So that way they have more options and it'd be easier to do.
They're going to sell the business eventually. They're either going to close it sell it to a child, a family member, a relative, or they're going to die and somebody's going to want to take it over. So they should use good, clean accounting software. So
Right.
eventually the business is exiting them or they're exiting the business. They'll know more by using good accounting software and running good reports. I can't harp on that enough, and hopefully people haven't tuned out because we're talking about numbers and financials, but there's nothing more important to the overall value of your business than knowing what the value is, because you're going to then look in on the details of that business and fix things that are broken or can be renegotiated, and it's going to boost your value without making another dollar in revenue. I just did a podcast this week. I sold a business for, I can't give you the exact dollar amount, but I sold a business, and right away, the guy sells another business, has another business where a manufacturer sells a similar product. He sent a component of the top selling SKU to that manufacturer and got a quote. Good quality, tested it out, works like a charm, $8 savings on cost of goods sold. That times the number of units sold on an annual basis adds 50% to the seller's discretionary earnings.
Oh, wow.
It's a huge, huge jump in equity in the business.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of things matter tremendously. And good data matters. And it all starts with accounting software. I'm harping on it. I'll stop.
Well,
I can tell you 10 more stories about accounting software where people got more value for the business because of that. But hopefully the message is clear.
Well, because at the end of the day, your discretionary earnings is top line minus costs. So if you're figuring out ways to not just grow your top line, but to have less costs and be more efficient while working less, then you will have a better exit. Am I right there?
Yes. And people that use QuickBooks people that use Excel instead of accounting software, they miss some of those costs. Or if they commingle with other things, some of those costs get commingled and lost and left out. And it's easily identifiable by me. And I'll be like, okay, well, what about internet service? You don't have that as an expense here. You're running an internet-based business. All of those things are critically important. I was at two quick stories. I know I'm probably running long here, but I sold a business a few years ago where the guy owned it for 10 years. He had a full-time job. He owned it for 10 years, ran the business with a credit card and a napkin bank statement. Really, that's all he had. I said, we can't, I need a profit and loss. Here's a template. Here's a template. You can build the P&L, but I would really recommend you just hire this company and pay them $1,500. Take all that same data and put it in QuickBooks. He didn't want to do that. He did the template, didn't want to spend $1,500. And this is a business that was worth $700,000-$800,000. We had it under LOI 3 times and it fell through 3 times for various reasons, but mostly because of the lack of confidence in the financials. He finally relented, hired a bookkeeper. They put that same data in QuickBooks. We listed the business for sale. It went under LOI for $50,000 more and closed. So he invested $1,500 in just professional software, had a CPA or a bookkeeper do it, and he ended up with $50,000 more and a closed transaction. It's psychological. Buyers are putting their life savings on the line. They want to believe, they want to trust, they need confidence that it's going to do well. The other quick story, and I'll stop after this, is that I was at a mastermind event where the owner of the business got up and he showed his financials. These are the reports I look at every single month. I don't run them. I have somebody do it for me. I admit it's a very big business, but I run them every single month and I look at them. And after a few months, I noticed that my shipping cost was going up and up and up. If I hadn't noticed that, at the end of a 12-month period, it would have cost me $1 million. And his businesses were 7 to 8 times that. Now that we know seller's discretionary earnings, it would have cost him 7 to 8 times. It would have cost him $1 million off his discretionary earnings. If he sold his business, he would have lost $7 million, right? 1 million times 7 times in his case.
Oh, wow.
Those are the details that matter, looking at the P&Ls and reviewing it every single month. You can't do that really well with Excel or Fetcher or anything else that you might be using.
Right. They might help you with some initial reporting or whatnot, but you definitely still need to put it into good accounting software. So I think you've definitely driven that point home.
I'll be quiet on that subject.
Well, this has been very helpful, and I know everyone listening is going to get a lot out of it. So if they had additional questions and they wanted to reach out to you, how would they get a hold of you?
First and foremost, the website is quietlightbrokerage.com, and you can reach out to any of us there through the website. I'm Joe at quietlightbrokerage.com, or you can do inquiries at quietlightbrokerage.com. If you want to do a valuation, just click free valuation form, and the broker in charge that particular day will reach out and work with you on doing a valuation.
Awesome. And I know you also share a lot of this information if someone wants to dive even deeper. Is there anywhere they can go to listen to you dive deeper?
Well, there's a couple of places. They can go to the Quiet Light podcast, where we talk about this all the time. We have people that bought businesses sharing their successes, their failures, people that sold businesses and walk the path before, the listeners in the audience walk that path. We also have experts on about sales taxes, about, whatever the case might be, value-added tax, you name it, we have them there, and that's at the Quiet Light podcast. But we also have a resource section on the website with a book on how to transfer an Amazon seller account, things of that nature, how to, do your own valuation on your business. It's all there in the resource section. One of the things that Mark has done very well over the years is just create great content. And it's helping people. Our goal is to help first, and whatever comes out of it, but help first. That's what he did for me when I sold my business back in 2010, and that's what we continue to do as entrepreneurs, just helping other entrepreneurs understand the value of their business if they ever decide to exit it someday.
Awesome. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation, and thanks for being on the Maximizing E-commerce podcast today.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
Thanks, Joe.